One hero in this book, I think people know from one aspect of his life, and I'm talking about Medgar Evers, who's a hero of the civil rights movement. We know about his later work, but he was in the military. He earned, as you write, two Bronze Stars on the beachhead of Normandy in northern France. He celebrated his 21st birthday in 1946 by leading a group of Black veterans who attempted to register to vote in Decatur, Mississippi, but he was turned away by a white mob with guns. Talk about the fullness of Medgar Evers, maybe how his service, excuse me, his service in the military informed his civil rights service once he got home.
So Medgar Evers' story really encapsulates the much broader African American experience during the war. So he actually drops out of high school when he's 17 and volunteers for the army. He enlists in 1943, and by 1944, his unit deploys to Normandy. They arrive Normandy just days after the D-Day invasion in June of 1944. He's part of the 325th Port Battalion, and so the kind of work he was doing was indicative of the really important supply and logistical work that other Black troops did. His unit was in charge of unloading Allied ships, taking off ammunition, other supplies, and then loading them onto trucks. They loaded them onto trucks called the Red Ball Express, which was a group of Black truck drivers who drove supplies all across Europe after D-Day. And truly what made it possible for the Allies to push into Germany in those months after the D-Day invasion. And so it really helped lay the groundwork for the kind of campaign that the frontline combat troops were able to make, that without the work of these supply units, Allied troops couldn't move, shoot, or eat. And Medgar Evers was one of thousands of Black Americans playing this kind of on-the-ground role there. What Evers ends up saying, though, is that when he's in France, it opens up his eyes to what's possible. Encountering white people in France, he says, was the first time he ever felt like he was treated fully as a human by a white person. And it was radically different than what he encountered when he was in Mississippi. And so he's only 19 at the time. But when he comes back at the end of the war, he comes back to Mississippi and dedicates his life to fighting for civil rights because he sees that another world is possible, another way of engaging across racial divides is possible. As you just noted, though, he encounters intense resistance in Mississippi. That whole generation of Black veterans, they come back and start fighting for civil rights, but too often, particularly in the South, they encounter white citizens who want to make sure that that system of Jim Crow segregation is maintained, that those racial hierarchies are maintained. So in 1946, on his 21st birthday, Evers leads a group of Black veterans who try to register to vote in Decatur, Mississippi, but they're turned away by a white mob with guns, which I think encapsulates the real pressure that was going on in those years immediately following the war. Black veterans had just fought for their country. They risked their lives. They wanted the opportunity to be full citizens. They wanted to be able to vote, but they still weren't allowed to vote in most parts of the South. In Mississippi, for example, less than 1% of Black adults were registered to vote because of decades of discrimination and intentional racial violence and intimidation. What Evers later says about that incident of trying to register to vote is that he and other Black troops had been at Omaha Beach. They had fought for America, including Mississippi. And after all that, after the Germans hadn't killed them, it looked like white Mississippians would. Evers continues to dedicate his life to civil rights. He takes on increasingly important roles in the NAACP in Mississippi throughout the 1950s. He helps investigate the lynching of Emmett Till in 1955. And then he keeps fighting for civil rights and voting rights until he's tragically assassinated in 1963. And I think the final 2 points I would add here would be the killer of Medgar Evers was Byron Dale Beckwith, who himself was a military veteran. In fact, it's his fingerprints on his registration for the Marine Corps that helps to lead to his eventual capture and arrest, and also the decades-long advocacy by Myrlie Evers Williams, Medgar's widow. And the last piece I would add is Evers is buried at Arlington National Cemetery. And so it's where I conclude one of the chapters about the homecoming of Black troops, that for me, when we tell the story of Medgar Evers, tell the story about how he dedicated his life to civil rights and how the whole generation of Black veterans fought for civil rights. We think about how he's buried at Arlington National Cemetery. When we think about what it means to be an American, we should be thinking about people like Medgar Evers, because he truly gave everything in his life to make America a better place.